10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi everyone, I'm Gregory from DevExpress. Thank you for tuning into our live stream today. Unlike most of our other streams, today I'm going to be on my own. Sadly, both Areg, Amanda, and also Don aren't available today, so I thought we'd just wing it and try it just like this, just me today. So, like most of our streams, I'm going to be talking about DevExtreme today. However, we're going to have a little bit of a twist. As you've seen from the title of today's video, we're going to be discussing Next.js and how to integrate it with DevExtreme components. And of course, Next.js is unique among React frameworks in that it's using both server and client-side components. And so that creates some unique opportunities and challenges for us. But hopefully today we can demystify some of the confusion with our components and React, specifically with Next.js. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started and let's get to it. So on my screen here, I have this page open from our docs, specifically in the React section, and I'll zoom in a bit. And this section under our integration guides, create a DevExtreme application with Next.js, describes how we can get started with Next and our components. And this is just a very simple guide. So if you've never even tried Next.js, you can get started pretty quickly just by following this guide. And as long as you know React, you should be able to figure it out, generally speaking. And hopefully by the end of today's stream, if anyone's interested in trying Next.js, they'll be able to do so. So with that, I'll go ahead and open my terminal. And I'm going to go ahead and start a new Next.js project. And the way I'm going to do that is by saying npx create next app at latest, and I'm going to give it a name of DevExtreme Next Demo. And also, I will note that everything I'm going to do today is already on our GitHub page, so that should be in the description. So if you want to check it out and download the app, try it yourself, it's you're welcome to do so. And so we're going to be prompted with a number of questions here. First of all, it's going to say, do you want to use TypeScript? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. ESLint, I'll say yes. Tailwind, yes. The source directory, yes. App router, again, a yes. And customizing default import alias, I'm going to say no. And we'll just let that go ahead and get started with for us here. And it'll take a second to build and download all the dependencies. Of course, as usual with NPM, we're going to get some nice warnings, but we can ignore that. And I'll go ahead and clear the screen. So we're going to need to install a number of other dependencies here. So I'm going to cd into that new project I just created. And if we see the project structure, we can see all the files there. I'll clear the screen once again. And I need to install a few things. So I'm going to install NextAuth. And I am going to be using some basic authentication just so we can see how that all works. I'm going to say at nextauth /Prisma adapter. And we are going to be using Prisma. We're going to be using Prisma client. And bcrypt. So bcrypt is just the encryption library for JavaScript, and we're going to be needing that for securing our user passwords. And so I'll just hit enter there, let this download, and we'll just give that a second. And we're going to install Prisma and at type /bcrypt as dev dependencies. And finally, we're going to install our DevExpress packages. So it's going to be DevExtreme and DevExtreme React. And so we'll let those two install as well. And before we get started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize Prisma. So I'm going to say npx Prisma init, and I'm going to give it the flag of data source provider, and I'm going to be using SQLite in this case, just so it's nice and easy for everyone. However, changing this database provider to any of the databases that SQLite, or excuse me, Prisma supports is very easy. We just change the environment variable and that's about it. And so we'll hit that and everything worked. Everything looks good so far. And we'll clear the screen. I am quickly going to open a new terminal, just so we can have that there so we can run the app without any trouble. And I'm going to open this project up. And as we can see, we have our Prisma folder here that was newly created. If I show the hidden files, we can see we have our .env file. And I'm going to start by editing that .env file. And as we can see, we already have this database URL because we gave it that SQLite database provider flag. It created for us. And this is just the standard local, DB file, of course, for SQLite. Under this, I'm going to say next auth secret, and I'm going to set this to just my secret. Of course, what we would want here is an actual secret key that we'd use with, a key gen in our terminal, something like that to generate a key. And I'm going to say next auth URL is equals to http://172.22.5.80:3000. And this is just the server I'm going to be running this on locally here. If you're running this on your local machine, you just change this to localhost, or your localhost IP, whatever it is. But in this case, I'm doing it like this just because for next auth, it will attempt to redirect, and by having this here, it'll redirect properly back to our base root. So this is just a little bit of insurance just in case we make a mistake or forget something. It won't redirect us somewhere random. So I can open this file tree back up, and if we look into our Prisma folder, we can see we have a schema.prisma file. So I'll go ahead and open that up. And in this schema.prisma file, I'm going to go ahead and create our user model. So to do that, I'm going to say model user, and this is nearly correct, but not exactly. So I am going to be saying ID of string at ID at default. I'm going to be setting it to a UUID. I am going to have a name of string. I am going to have an email of string, and it is going to be unique. And I'm going to have a pass for this string. I'm going to have a created at date time and an updated at date time. And as we can see, Prisma is relatively simple. It basically follows the same general idea as any other kind of SQL ORM. And it's pretty easy to use. Of course, there are many options. I just decided to use Prisma as it's relatively common. Very popular one nowadays is Drizzle, if anyone's familiar with that. And Drizzle is generally, I would say, kind of preferred now over Prisma, as it's slightly better in terms of performance. However, Prisma is a little bit easier to use, so I decided to stick with that for now. Plus, this isn't very performance intensive, this app, so I just figured we would stick with Prisma. And so now what I am going to do is I'm just going to open a terminal quickly, and I'm going to say npx Prisma migrate dev -- name is init. So this is going to just essentially create our database file for us. And also, if you have an existing database, what you can do is say Prisma pull, I believe is the command, and that should pull the existing schema from your database so you don't have to create it manually. So that's a nice feature. So if you're trying to create a new app based on an existing database, you can do it that way as well. So I'll just hit enter there, and it will generate our migration there. And I'll close that terminal. And as we can see in the Prisma folder, we have our migration file here, our dev.db. And so that's all set for us. So we can go ahead and close that Prisma folder there. I'll go ahead and open up my source folder. I'll jump into my globals.css, and I am going to delete everything in here, except I'm going to add a margin of 0 to the whole app. And I'm going to also make the padding 0, and box sizing is going to be border box. And that's all we're going to need for this globals.css file. So with Next.js, the way it works, unlike normal React apps, is the routing is done by the app folder. And so we don't have to specify any of these routes. We just have to create folders with a page inside them, and that becomes our route. So for example, we have this page file here, as well as the layout. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my layout file. And in this layout, so this is going to be our global layout. What I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to delete this inter font here. And I'm going to come down here to this class name and get rid of the font there as well. However, what I'm going to do is right above the return, I'm going to add this variable here called body class name, and this is going to include DX viewport, all of our DevExpress class names, just so we don't get any errors in the console when we run our app, when we run our build. I'm just doing this like this. We can just simply add dx-viewport inside the class name here, and it will work just fine. This is just a little bit of a housekeeping trick. So, and in here, so I'm just going to say body class name. And so basically our style sheet will be applied globally. And for this metadata, unless hopefully everyone's familiar, but if you're not, basically this is just the title and description of your app. This is very helpful, of course, for SEO. So when the crawler finds your site and sees the description, it'll have a better idea of what the page is, and of course Google or Bing or whatever search engine will have a bit more information for their algorithm to figure out what is on your page. And so I'm just going to change the title to DX Next App, and we can just leave that as it is. And of course, up here, we need to import our style sheet. And I'm going to be using the Material Blue Dark theme today. And another note is that our material themes do integrate with regular Material UI components. So if you want to integrate those, we do also have a guide to that. So if you see right here, it says use MUI components in your DevExtreme app. So we can see how that all works as well. So in case anyone is interested in using both MUI components and our default style sheets and our components, that can be done also. And so I'll just go ahead and save that file. I'll open up our page file. And in our page file, what I'm going to do at the top of the page, I'm going to import React. I'm going to get rid of this next image. And I'm going to import link from next link. So for linking, instead of using A tags in Next.js, we use this next link. And I'm going to delete everything in here. And it's like it's not cooperating with me. So I'll go ahead and do that. And in this return, I'm going to create a div. And in here, I'm going to say h2 with a class name of font bold MB-4, so margin bottom -4, and I'm just going to say welcome to DX, just like that. And in this div up here, I'm going to give it a class name of flex column item center justify center min height screen and padding in the Y direction of 2. And finally, I'm going to give an h4. And this h4, I am going to say your next great app starts here, which is our slogan. And we can change this to NextJS, just like that. A little thing we can do right there. And for the class name here, we're going to say MB-8. And what we can do is simply copy some stuff over. Just because I don't really have the time. Oops. I don't know why it keeps doing that. But there we go. Sorry about that. Anyway, so today what we're going to be doing is basically just having a very simple homepage, and we just have a couple of spans here, and I'll explain why in a second, but we simply have spans instead of actual buttons here just because it makes it a bit easier for us, because this is going to be a server component, the entire page is, and we don't want to have buttons because buttons are, generally speaking, interactive and they require a client component. And what we don't want is for our client components to basically render and slow down our entire page. So we don't want to have client components directly in this page file. What I'll do later is I'll create a client component that will be inserted into this page, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. So we'll just go ahead and save that. And just to make sure everything is running, I'm just going to go ahead and say npm run dev. And I'll jump here and I will refresh this page. And as we can see, it's all rendering, and we have these two mock buttons here. And I just use some Tailwind to make them look like buttons, but like I said, they're not actual buttons because that would cause us some issues. So jumping back to our code, what we can do now is we can start working on our authentication. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is create a couple folders. So I'm going to say lib. So create a lib folder, a types folder, and these are under the source directory, not the app. The app, if we put it there, it would create them as pages unless we prefix them with an underscore, or we surrounded them with, or actually I don't know about the underscore. That's the pages directory, my bad. If we surround them with parens, then it wouldn't be considered a route, but it's easier just to keep it in the source directory. That's why when we were setting up the app, we said to use the source directory. I think it just makes it a lot cleaner and easier. And I'm going to create a components folder. And inside the app directory now, I'm going to create a folder called API with a folder called auth inside it, with another folder with square brackets called next auth. And in that folder, I'm going to create a file called route.ts. So just so everyone can see the structure there, that's what it looks like. And this is basically just going to be our next auth route. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into this type folder and create a file called nextauth.d.ts. And I'll jump into that folder. And I am going to just copy and paste that in there. And so essentially what this is just going to do is going to get rid of some TypeScript errors for us. And this is just, overloading some modules for NextAuth, so it's a little bit better. If we were using regular JavaScript, of course, none of these issues would pop up, but in TypeScript here, we need to make some modifications to the standard next auth kind of types. So that's just what this file does there. I'll go ahead and close that. We're not going to be needing to look at that again. Inside the lib folder, I'm going to create a file called authoptions.ts, as well as a file called prisma.ts. And we'll jump into that Prisma folder file, And in that Prisma file, what this is basically going to do is it's going to create our Prisma client. And I'll just paste that in again. And this stuff is all just from the Prisma documentation. I literally just copied and pasted it from there. This is how they recommend setting up Next.js projects. And essentially what this does, instead of simply having a Prisma client equals new Prisma client, this prevents in our dev environment from it creating multiple clients at once, essentially, just this logic here. That is a problem that they've had that this is the solution to. Obviously, in a production build, we just skip down and just create it once, of course, because the app isn't going to be rebuilt over and over. So we can go ahead and close that file. And again, in our lib folder, I'm going to open up this auth options file. And for this auth options, once again, I'm going to copy and paste some stuff just because this is all from documentation. And we've seen a lot of this stuff before. So I don't want to bore everyone by explaining all this stuff because, of course, not everyone's probably going to be using NextAuth. And so essentially what's happening here is we're creating a credentials provider, which is just going to be an email and password. And down here, we have this authorized property here. And this is the important part is right here where we say we're going to await Prisma client.user.find unique. So we're going to create or look for a new user. This adapter here, it's going to be a Prisma adapter. And NextAuth supports a number of different adapters. So the adapter is essentially your ORM or what you're using for your database connection. They support MongoDB and a lot of the different ones, Drizzle, Prisma, really too many to name. And down here we have these callbacks. So these are essentially going to save our tokens and user information and provide it back to us so we can use that information when we make our requests. And down here is pages. This just lets NextAuth know what our default sign-in page path is going to be. So yeah, and just let me see what this error here. Oh, it looks like I have a misspelling. So let me jump back into my Prisma file there. And I will run my migration again. And hopefully this will take care of that slight error we had. And let me try refreshing this to make sure it's there. And it should be fine. So we could just ignore that for now. And so essentially this auth options here, this is just what we're going to be exporting. And the reason why I put it in this lib folder is when we build this app, if we had put it in this route file under the .nextauth folder, it would create a error that the auth options can't be exported. But essentially it works just the same way. I just moved it to of course, a different file. So then if we jump into our route file here, what we can do is just say import nextauth from nextauth, and import auth options from @lib/auth options. And if we notice the @ symbol here, we don't have to use that, but it makes it a lot easier. And if you want to control that with more detail, you can jump into the tsconfig. And as we see here, we have this paths property here. And that's how we determine these relative paths. I'm going to say const handler equals nextauth auth options, and I'm going to export handler as get and handler as post. And that's it for that page. And if we jump back into our auth folder here, I'm going to create a new folder called register and create a route.ts file. And it's important to note that it does need to be called route, and the API route is going to be at API/auth/register. And so if we jump into that file, what we can do is we can import next response, and I'll swap the order. So we import next response and next request from next server, and we're going to import bcrypt from bcrypt, and we're going to import the Prisma client, and we're going to export an async function called post, with a parameter of request, and we're going to say const email, password, and name is going to be await request.body.json, just like that. And I'm going to say if not email, password, or name, we're going to say it's a bad request. And I'm going to just go ahead and change that to just simple JSON. And down here, I'm going to create a try catch block with an error, and in the try, I'm going to say existing user is await Prisma client.user.find unique, where email, that looks correct. And what this is going to do is just check if we have an existing user with the same email, And if so, it's going to say user already exists. And below here, we're going to say const hashed password is await bcrypt dot hash password 10, and we're going to say const user is await Prisma client dot user dot create, and this data object is going to be correct there. And we're going to return next response.json with the user and a status of 201, just like that. And I wonder if it's still giving me that same issue. But it should be just fine there. And this is giving me a slight warning. It says rec.body is possibly null, because it should not say body there at all. And so that looks correct to me. So what we're going to do is we're going to close the app for a second and restart it. And we're going to just try and test this route. And so this route, it should work. And so I'm just going to copy and paste a curl command here in my terminal. And this is just going to try and create a new user. And so let's just try that. And it looks like it works. So we got it back. We have this hashed password here. And we have our created and updated that information there. And we have, of course, the ID is a UUID. So everything looks like it's working there. So that's the good news. And now what I can do is I can just simply close this API folder entirely, because we are actually done with that. And so now what I'm going to go ahead and start doing is creating our pages. So I'm going to create a page called Sign In. And I'll open that up. And for this sign in page, it's going to be relatively simple. And I'm going to say import get server session. And this is how we're going to get our auth information. And I'm going to say import auth options from @lib/auth options. And I'm going to import redirect from next navigation. And I'm going to create a file here or component here called sign in page. And it's going to be async. And let me make sure I get this right. And I'm going to export it down here. And up here I'm going to say const section equals await get server session. And I'm going to pass in our auth options into there. And what this is going to do is we can just get the session and see if we are logged in or not. And if it's going to be a session, then I'm going to redirect to the dashboard, which I haven't created yet, of course, but we will soon. And essentially what I'm doing here is if someone tries to log in and they're already logged in, it's just going to redirect them automatically to the dashboard page rather than them, trying to log in again. And I'm just going to create a nice return here. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy some of this stuff in here, just in the interest of time. And as we can see, we have this sign-in form here. And I'm going to go ahead and import that, even though we haven't created it yet. And I'm going to say component/sign-in form. And we're going to jump into our components folder and create our sign-in form. And so for our sign-in form, what this is going to be, because it's going to be interactive, it's going to be a client component. So we're going to say use client at the top. We're going to import use ref and use state. We're going to be importing sign in from next auth/react. We're going to be needing use router from next auth, or from next/navigation. The next router is used in the pages directory structure, but we're using the app structure, so we're going to be using next navigation instead. And we're going to be needing a number of DevExtreme imports, which includes our form, a number of things that include like our email rule, required rules, that kind of thing, our load indicator, and our notify component. And I won't bore everyone by watching me create this again, because I've used a very similar version of this in previous streams. So if anyone's been watching, they've seen this. So essentially what's going to happen here when we submit our form, what we're going to do here is we're going to await the sign-in, and the sign-in again is from NextAuth, so it creates a nice sign-in for us already, so we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to create our own sign-in API route. And the type is going to be credentials, of course, because it's an email and password. So we're going to just have our email and password there, redirect is false. We're going to handle that ourselves. And we're going to say if result is an .error, we're going to have a notify that says invalid email or password. And this is just going to be appearing at the top of the page. And here, if it's not an error, we're just going to replace the location with the dashboard. And the reason why we're not using next navigation in this case, we could use the next router for this and say next, say like router.push. However, I found that it has a slight problem. There's a slight bug with the router. And I found an open GitHub issue about it, but it looks like it hasn't been resolved yet. And the issue only exists on production builds, where when we try to actually navigate to another page, it doesn't actually do it until we refresh. So just a slight bug, but this is the solution, and it works just fine just using the fallback regular JavaScript window.location. So that works just fine. And again, our form down here, this is just the DevExpress form, and this is directly from our templates. And it just has some basic options, just, simple fields. And I'll go ahead and save that file. And so now everything is working. The sign-in form should be there. I'll go ahead and stop this app again and rerun it. And if we refresh this and we click the sign in link here, it takes us to the sign in page. And if I try and sign in with that test credentials I just made with that curl command just a second ago, and Chrome is probably going to give me a little warning just because I have a very simple password, but if I hit login, this should work. And so just because we got rated just now on Twitch, I'll give a quick overview of what's going on again, just for people who are just joining. So we just created this simple Next.js app, and we're using Prisma, NextAuth, and right now I'm just working on the authentication. And as we can see here, it is working because we were redirected to our dashboard page. Of course, we haven't created it yet, so we have this default not found page, which, by the way, we can create our own if we wanted to. I'm just going to leave the default Next.js one for now. And so if we go back, we can go to our dashboard from the home page. If we hit sign in again, we will be automatically redirected to that dashboard because we have that check. However, what I really want to do is I don't want to just have that same kind of homepage. So if we're already signed in, someone goes to our homepage, I want them to be able to see that they're signed in already, so they can just directly go to the dashboard. Plus, we need to wait for them to sign out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our page file here, and I'm just going to go ahead and do a little copy and pasting again. And what I'm going to do here is, once again, I'm going to get the server session from NextAuth, have the session here, and if it's a session, I'm going to return a just different, slightly different page there, and we're going to have this sign out button. And the sign out button I'll create right now. And the sign out button, because it's going to be a button, it's actually going to be a client component within our server page. So that should be interesting. So in this components folder, I'm just going to say sign out button. And for this sign out button, it's going to be very simple. I'm going to say use client at the top of the page. I'm going to import sign out from nextauth/react. I'm going to import the button from DevExtreme React/button, just so we can have our nice DevExtreme styled button. I'm going to have our sign out button function here. And I'm going to return a button with an on-click event that says sign out. And here I'm just going to create a function that calls the sign out function. And I'm going to export that sign out button. Now, if we go back to our home page here, we can see we have that sign out button there. And if we click that button, we'll go back to the home page because we have set it in our environment variables. And so that is considered the main page of our app. So whenever we hit sign out, it'll go back to the default page that we set in that environment variables, unless we set it manually. And we can do that as well with properties of that sign out function. So again, if we go back to sign in, and I use those same credentials, I hit login, we go to this dashboard page, which isn't there, of course, but if we go back to our home page, we can see we have the sign out button and the dashboard button. We hit sign out and it jumps back to our home page. So it's very fast, very snappy. And so now what I'm going to go ahead and do is get started on that dashboard. And now for our dashboard, what we want is for the dashboard to be inaccessible unless we're signed in, right? So what I'm going to do is create a middleware function called middleware.ts, and it's just going to be under our source folder. And this middleware function is going to be relatively simple. So I'm going to say export default from nextauth / middleware, and I'm going to say export const config, which equals matcher / dashboard / path star. And so this is all it's going to take for us to protect our dashboard. So as we can see here, we're not signed in. So if we try to go to our dashboard, it's going to direct us back to our sign-in page. And as we can see in the URL, we have this callback URL up here because it's been redirected. And this is all being handled by the server, not the client. So it's very fast and very efficient, and it's generally more secure than if it was done all client side. So that's pretty much the biggest advantage with Next.js, is that sort of client server kind of mix and match. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is start by creating this dashboard page. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and create a loading page. And this loading page is just going to be the page that renders when we're waiting for the server to render one of our components. So this is just going to be a very simple center div that says loading. And I'm not sure, maybe we'll be able to see that. I'll try to refresh and see if we can see it. Yeah, so I don't know if everyone saw that, but it just says loading really quickly there. If I refresh again and I hit it, we can see it. So it just says that loading. So, you know, it's a little bit of a stopgap if we have a complicated page that needs to take more time to render on first load. Of course, with caching, after it's been loaded, it's all very quick. So that's, again, one of the benefits of server-side rendering. So now under our app folder, I'm going to create a new folder called dashboard. And in that, I'm going to create my page.tsx file. And if we open that up, we can import React. And we can say dashboard page. And we can just leave whatever Copilot decides to put for us. And we can save that and we can make sure that it's working. So again, I'll go back to the sign in. I'll hit on login and we can see our dashboard is being rendered there. So that's cool. And if we go back to our code, what I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm going to create a layout for this dashboard. So everything under this main dashboard folder here will be wrapped by this layout. So as well as our main layout, of course. So I'm going to create that layout file just like this. I'll go ahead and open that up. And this is going to be a client component. I'm going to need React, functional component, use memo from React. I'm going to be needing sign out from nextauth/React. I'm going to be needing use router from next navigation. And I'm going to be needing the DevExpress toolbar from DevExtreme React/toolbar. And I'm going to create an interface here called dashboard layout props. And it's going to be a React node. So that's just going to be our, children basically, and that just prevents TypeScript error. And I'm going to create a function here called logout, and it's going to be an async function. And here I'm just going to say await sign out, and we don't need to redirect anywhere because again, it will handle that automatically for us. We don't need to specify it. And I'm just going to type this out because I don't want to create it for me. And we can export that. Up here, I'm just going to go ahead and say const router equals use router. And I'm going to create a use memo called toolbar items. And it looks like it's already getting it for me. However, it is missing a couple things. So I will adjust it myself. In fact, it's missing quite a bit. So I will simply paste that in myself, and in here, this is going to need to be a function here, just so these functions in here will work. And as we can see here, we have a home button, which just sends us back to the main dashboard page. We have a profile page, a sales page, and a logout button. And down here, I'm going to create a return. And I'm going to create a class name of dashboard layout. We don't really need to do that, but I just did it just for good practice. And with the toolbar, I'm going to give it a class name of shadow medium, just so we have a little shadow underneath that toolbar. And if we jump back, we can see we already have that toolbar created for us. So if we refresh the page, we can see we have our main dashboard page here. If we hit profile, we don't have it, so of course we're going to get a 404 there. We haven't created that yet, but this is all working as planned. And if we go to log out, we again go back to our sign-in page, we can redirect back to our home page. If we try to click dashboard, again, we'll go back to our sign-in. If I log in, we jump back to our dashboard. And of course, we could ignore this warning up here. We just close that. And so, yeah, it looks like we're at the hour mark. So we'll just about call it here. But before I go, I just wanted to point out that with Next.js, we do have a lot more options here that I didn't really touch on. This isn't really a Next.js tutorial in and of itself. There are much better ones than what I'm doing here, but ultimately the whole point of this is to demonstrate how our components can work with Next.js components. So for example, we have this layout, which is a client component up here. We have a dashboard page here, which is a server component. So we can mix and match, of course, and just because a server component is nested inside a client component, it still does work. I used our own toolbar here just because it's much faster to create, but you can create a navigation bars and whatnot using server components. The buttons can be server actions, that kind of thing. Or you can just use links like I did on the home page rather than buttons themselves. That's another option. That being said, most of the time we do want interactivity. So it's kind of a give and take, whether you want that extra interactivity of a client component or whether you want just the general speed and caching ability of a server component. So if we go to the inspector here, and we throttle to fast 3G, and I refresh, what we're going to see is that this text here is going to show up much faster than the toolbar up here. Just because the text, of course, is going to be rendered on the server and it's going to be delivered to us. And it's going to be a much smaller payload than the toolbar because it has to load up the entire client-side project. So if I hit refresh, we can see we just have the dashboard text. It loaded up our style sheet, so we're just going to wait. And of course, this is a very slow example, this fast 3G throttle. It's much slower than anything you'll really find out there. But as we can see, after a little while, it loads up the client side and we get all the toolbar options. So that's nice, and that's a really nice, easy explanation of what's going on here. Sadly, I didn't have time to get to these other pages. So hopefully next week, I'll be able to come back and finish that up, maybe add some more. And one thing I didn't add is this register page. In our example that is on GitHub, I did create that register page and I added a little bit of content to the dashboard. So if you want to download the project and see what's there, you're welcome to do so. And so that just about wraps it up for today. So please remember to subscribe, like the video, comment, share, all that good stuff. And from us at DevExpress, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.